Hello and welcome to this video, or indeed channel if this is the first time that you're here. I'm Johnny, I head up the PE tutor, and this video today is intended for any class teacher in a primary or junior school setting. Although these concepts could be transferred into the secondary school setting, I'm going to be talking from my own perspective, which is primary school PE. I'm one of 4 teachers in a specialist PE department in an 800 pupil international English curriculum school, and what I'm going to be sharing with you today is our approach to teaching, learning and assessment. We believe it allows for cumulative learning, creative teaching and, possibly the best thing, time efficient data entry and assessment. When starting at the beginning of this assessment policy, we actually had to start at the end. We asked ourselves, what would our Year 6 pupils look like in PE if we've done a good job? What can they do? Now, the obvious and often quoted answer to that is fundamental motor skills, which a lot of our assessment policy uses and draws from, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. We had to ask ourselves 2 more questions. What are those fundamental motor skills, and when would we expect to see them in our pupils? Now, as you might imagine, we had a list of skills that seemed endless. We needed a way to streamline and strip back the ones that weren't the most essential and just be left with the ones that we knew that we had to teach at a certain point in time in order to enable that Year 6 pupil vision that we all had. So we began categorising them into the different sporting contexts. Athletics, gymnastics, dance, invasion games, racket sports, swimming. And then once we had a clear vision of what a successful pupil would look like in each of those contexts, we then stacked the fundamental skills on top of each other so that we knew if we taught step 1, they could then access step 2, then they could access step 3, then they could access step 4 and 5, all the way up until they reached that goal that we had in mind for them. So at the end of this process, we were left with 46 fundamental motor skills. These were across all of the different sporting contexts that we teach in. And they were from early years foundation stage, so FS1, FS2 or kindergarten or nursery, wherever you are, right the way up to Year 6. And we knew if we taught those 46 fundamental skills alongside other additional things, but we just focused on those 46 absolute non-negotiable skills, our pupils stand the best chance possible of reaching that envisaged goal. Now, 46 is a bit of a strange number, but what it actually represents is 1 fundamental skill per sporting context per year that a child is in. So in a year where, take a Year 1 student for example, would have 5 different sporting contexts, we would be teaching and assessing 5 separate fundamental skills, 1 for each sporting area. Now, it's very important to stress that these 46 fundamental, non-negotiable skills shouldn't be drill taught. We're not advocating in any way that a teacher should turn up and teach the same skill week in, week out, lesson in, lesson out. That is not good teaching and it won't lead to very good learning. Instead, these skills should just be given priority. So a very broad and well-balanced unit of work in a sporting context should still be delivered. But when it comes to nailing down specific skills and evidencing and assessing and championing, it's that 1 skill that should be focused on. Now, this video hasn't the scope to go into that well-balanced and varied unit of work. We will do in another video, but for this one, we're looking at how we can assess those 46 fundamental skills and the methodologies behind that. Now, I'm not going to stand here and go through all 46 of those fundamental skills, but what I will do is leave a link below this video, so if you click on that, and it will take you to the table that we use before every lesson to help guide us on that priority fundamental skill that we know that we need to hit. So if you think this might be of interest to you, go and check that out and download that tool. So the second part of this video is going to be devoted to how we actually assess these 46 fundamental skills. We do this by using 2 evidence-based measures, 1 for physical competence and 1 for effort or self-determination. When measuring a student's competence, what we're looking at is the quality of their acquisition of the fundamental skill that's being taught in that unit of PE. We base this on the skill acquisition theory, where there's 3 different stages to learning a new skill: cognitive, associative and autonomous phases. A pupil in the cognitive phase of learning will be performing a skill inconsistently, inaccurately, inefficiently, incorrectly. It won't look good. probably because they've only just been taught it. After some development, a pupil might then enter the associative stage, the second phase of learning. Now, the characteristics of a performer in this stage is it's getting better. There is some form of consistency. They might be able to get it right by themselves, but not every time. Most likely, they'll need prompts, they'll need encouragement. They can't do it twice in a row the same way. Then, with practice and repetition and coaching, a pupil might then enter the autonomous phase, whereby they can perform the fundamental skill automatically. They don't need the prompts, they don't need reminders, they don't need some practice attempts. They can go straight into it and they're performing it accurately, consistently, efficiently, fluently. It looks smooth. Now, as PE teachers, we're trying to get as many pupils as possible into that third phase of autonomous learning, where they're comfortable and accurately replicating all 46 fundamental skills that we want our Year 6 pupils to have. So how would assessing these phases of learning look in your lesson? Well, for each of the 46 fundamental skills, we've designed an activity that showcases each of the skills, so that when it comes time to assessing it, we can request that the class perform that activity. We then film it for 5 to 10 minutes and we circulate the class. We try and capture every pupil in their element without prompts, without practice. We just spring it on them almost, then film for 5 to 10 minutes, so then we can watch it back as a department to review it, to moderate it, and to complete the assessment there and then. To get to this point, what we would have done is introduce that showcase activity earlier on in the 5 to 6 week unit. So an example could be what we call Speed 1, which is running in zigzags into space, decelerating and stopping. When it comes time to assess that, we then call out Speed 1, we get the iPad out, we film the class completing their Speed 1, and we try and capture every student in their element performing the one fundamental skill that we're going to be grading. Our second assessment measure is self-determination. This is based on the self-determination theory, which suggests that perceived competence, peer relatedness, and autonomy over their learning can actually improve self-drive and motivation to learn. This measure actually helps us in two ways. Firstly, it guides us on how to deliver a lesson so that we foster those three facets of self-determination theory: competence, relatedness, and autonomy. The second way this assessment measure helps us is it tells us what we should be looking out for in our pupils. We're trying to observe pupil behaviours that suggest to us that they have high self-confidence, that they can work with their teammates well, and that they are willing to take on choice, willing to take on ownership over the direction of their learning. For example, when assessing competency, can we see the pupil talking with good self-confidence? Are they willing to pick up a challenge and actually work hard at it? Or do they engage in negative self-talk and throw in the towel early? For peer relatedness, can you put them in any team and they can work well? Or do they always compete to work with their friends and they avoid other people? Or if they're a good performer, they put other people down? And then for autonomy, do they have the self-awareness that they know what their weaknesses are that they need to improve? And do they go out of their way to ask for extra tips, to take on extra learning, to try and further themselves in the areas that they know that they're the weakest in? While it's rare to see a young pupil displaying all of those attributes, it's just an idea of what to look for. And the more clues you have, the more self-determined we could claim that they are. Now, for consistency between the two measures, where for competency we had cognitive, associative, autonomous, with the self-determination measure we used low, medium, high. So both measures have 3 data points. This works well with the software that our school uses, which is Classroom Monitor, where we have effectively 9 different gradings that we could give a person, a combination of either 2 measures at points 1, 2, or 3. Just like with the physical competency measure, our goal as PE teachers is to get as many pupils as possible up towards that top tier of self-determination. Combining these 2 measures then onto a graph, what we'd hope to see in as many pupils as possible is a high self-determination reading, and they're far along on their phase of learning, so that on a graph, they'd be in that top right quadrant of the graph. Autonomous learners with high self-determination across all 46 fundamental skills. Using visuals like that graph helps us immensely when talking to the pupils themselves, perhaps to parents in consultations, as well as other staff members. Moving forward, what we're hoping to do is actually assign specific support mechanisms that we can put in place in all quadrants of that graph, so that a pupil who is autonomous but low self-determination, we can give them specific feedback which is different to someone who might be in the cognitive phase but has high self-determination. We're not quite there yet, but perhaps by the time you watch this, we will be, and I'll leave the link to some more information to that below. Which brings us to the end. So if you did find it of use, perhaps hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so we can keep you updated with similar content to this video. And last thing from me is, if you did want to see what our 46 fundamental skills are, then click the link below this video and you can download yourself a copy. Until next time.